Well, howdy, and welcome to Conversations with Coyotes. My name is Bravado, I am a coyote, and this is The Conversation. In this time of social distancing and isolation, which, yep, still happening, it's clearer than ever that having hobbies we can immerse ourselves in has been absolutely instrumental in helping us stay just a little more sane. And not just that, we often define ourselves at least partially by the things we enjoy. Furry is a great example of a hobby that often transcends being simply a pastime and ends up bleeding over into other aspects of our lives, and the same can be said for countless other pursuits. And thanks to the internet, there's no shortage of ways to expand your horizons with regards to learning more about whatever interest you may have, as well as finding people who like doing what you like doing. But while social networks and forums and chat groups are invaluable to this, you'll also quickly discover that the people most prominent within any given hobbies community are the ones who excel at it, whatever that may mean. Obviously, every hobby has different criteria for success, but it typically involves some combination of time, talent, and access. And while it can be really fun to see folks who've taken things to the extreme, whether that means they've scavenged and hoarded away hundreds of rare sneakers, or they're able to create masterful works of art at speeds that are seemingly superhuman, to fixate on them exclusively is to run the risk of establishing them as the benchmark of how the hobby should be enjoyed. And this is where the problems start. Of course, it's great to have people to look up to and goals to strive for, but also remember that these folks have likely spent inordinate amounts of time and/or effort and/or money to get where they are. And it's not realistic to expect to be at that level immediately or maybe even ever. I think we have an easier time accepting this when it relates to a skill like drawing or making music, because we understand that, with few exceptions, talent isn't innate and is something that must be honed over time. Where it becomes murkier is when you get into hobbies that have a material element. Sneakers are a great example because often one of the main aspects of being into sneakers is figuring out how to get more sneakers. You'd think this would be as simple as strolling into your local Foot Locker, and sometimes it is, but frequently there's a lot of build-up and scrambling to try to get the latest thing, only to be met with failure. And while coping with the latest L is as much a part of the culture as anything, it also means that those who succeeded, who were lucky enough to cop that latest grail, just added another punch to their little certified sneakerhead ID card. But the intentional scarcity of and insane demand for the truly hyped shoes, the Off-Whites and Unions and Cactus Jacks, means that the vast majority of us will never be lucky enough to get a pair unless we're willing to pay dearly for them. And some folks are, because to them, owning a coveted pair of shoes is the only way for them to feel as though they're a true sneakerhead. All this to say that when you're exposed to how other people enjoy a hobby, it will more than likely impact how you enjoy it yourself, and there's no going back. It's the difference between buying sneakers because you want them and buying them because everyone else wants them, and it falls to you to find your place in that spectrum. You see these aftershocks a bunch in hobby-based chat groups. Of course, there's actual conversation that's really valuable and enlightening, but just as frequently, it's drowned out by folks trying to turn the focus toward themselves in search of acknowledgement. It can feel tiresome, especially in large group settings, but I can't say I don't empathize. We're all just seeking even the tiniest bit of assurance that we're doing the thing the right way, and sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. But while it's one thing to seek recognition from others in an effort to prop yourself up, it's another entirely to attempt to elevate yourself at their expense, particularly if that involves asserting that they don't take the thing as seriously as you, and therefore don't belong at all. This is called gatekeeping. It's a long-standing issue within all sorts of groups, and it's gross. Accusations such as these are often based on completely subjective criteria designed to establish the person wielding them as someone who is doing things the correct way, as though theirs is the one true path to enjoying the hobby in question. And in addition to being hurtful to anyone on the receiving end, statements like this have the ability to shape the mindset of the group as a whole and can result in these assumed and often unrealistic barriers to entry. And that's how you end up with people who don't think they're allowed to be part of furry until they commission a bunch of art and get a fursuit. 100% false, by the way. There's one step to becoming furry, and the step is just decide that you're a furry now. But while those of us who've been around for a while understand that, the same ain't necessarily true for those who just got here. Nobody wants to feel as though they're not enjoying their own hobby right, especially if doing it right just translates to spending more money than someone else. The correlation between money and enthusiasm is especially prevalent in those materialistic hobbies I mentioned before, wherein collecting is a common aspect, particularly when the cost of any one item, for example, a pair of shoes, is relatively modest. As a result, there's this underlying assumption that to be a real sneakerhead, you need a closet overflowing with carefully curated kicks, when the reality is that it's more about the excitement you have for sneakers and sneaker culture than what you're wearing on your feet. The same is true for so many other hobbies, and that's why it makes no sense to add this imaginary cost of entry, nor to create all these other hoops for people to jump through just to prove their worth. To do so is to close the door on potential friendships just because of some arbitrary metrics, and honestly, who wants to hang around someone who makes a habit of that? Listen, life is stressful enough, especially right now, and adding all these imaginary obligations to things that should bring us joy ain't helping. Instead, let's pursue our hobbies in the way that brings us the most fulfillment, and do our best to help others do the same. I promise, it'll be more fun for everyone. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll catch y'all later. Nice.